August 2008. On K2, at the infamous Bottleneck, it was absolute chaos. As dozens of climbers fled the death zone in a frantic race for their lives, one man stepped toward destruction. Pasang Bhote, an elite high-altitude guide, turned against the tide. He started climbing up, straight under a looming ice serac, to rescue his trapped brother, Jumik. He pulled off the impossible. He reached his target and even radioed in a triumphant message. "I found them!" But Pasang didn't know this was just a false summit, and the mountain had already prepared its cruelest blow. Why did this seasoned professional break the #1 rule of survival? And what really happened in those fateful minutes? Let's break it down. Let's start at the beginning. Imagine carrying a heavy refrigerator on your back up an endless flight of stairs, all while breathing through a thin cocktail straw. For most people, that's a nightmare scenario. But for Pasang Bhote, it was just another Tuesday at the office. He comes from the Rolwalling Valley. Even in a country full of mountains, this place has a special reputation. It's a true forging ground for the toughest people on the planet. If Everest is the stage, then Rolwalling is the training camp that either breaks you or turns you into a machine. Pasang belongs to the Bhote ethnic group. It's a clan related to the Sherpa, but they often keep to themselves. While Western athletes spend years training in hyperbaric chambers just to be able to walk at altitude, Pasang's body has been wired to operate in a deficit since birth. His early years weren't spent on playgrounds, but at altitudes above 4,000 meters. His lungs and heart work differently. They know how to extract energy where others simply can't survive for long. But in this business, nobody lets you start at the top. Pasang began his career on the dusty tourist trails in the trekking zone, far from the snow-capped peaks. He started as a porter. He hauled woven baskets loaded with gear that weighed as much as he did: food, tents, other people's equipment, all of it pressed down on his shoulders as he climbed toward the base camps. Most people either break under that weight or stay at that level forever. But Pasang just got faster. Western journalists often describe guys like him as the invisible heroes in the background. Clients only ever see their backs. Pasang is out front, kicking steps into the hard-packed fern. He's not just carrying things anymore, he's moving into the elite division. He's becoming a high-altitude guide. And here's where a crucial detail emerges that changes the entire picture. Pasang starts working at extreme altitudes without using supplemental oxygen. This habit of taking on the toughest jobs becomes his signature. Let's look at this from the perspective of a high-altitude researcher. At 8,000 meters, the air contains only a third of the oxygen we're used to. Every single movement requires a colossal effort. A normal person can't function properly in these conditions. Commercial climbers put on masks, open the valves on their tanks, and create an artificial environment for themselves. Pasang, however, breathes the thin, dry air directly. His phenomenal physical strength allows him not just to keep pace with clients, but to perform grueling work at the very limit of human endurance. Eyewitnesses at base camps were often stunned by his stamina. Pasang could descend to pick up a new load of supplies and climb right back up again. This incredible ability to function for so long, with so little oxygen, makes him indispensable to any expedition. Team leaders know one simple rule: if there's a problem on the route, this is the man who can fix it faster than anyone else. His body is the perfect instrument for working in the harshest conditions on Earth. On the radio at 8,000 meters, names often sound the same. "Pasang, come in! Pasang, do you copy?" Someone yells into their radio, and half the camp might answer. The name is as common here as John is in London. To avoid confusion in a zone where one mistake can cost you your life, climbers came up with a simple navigation system. By 2008, our hero was known around the base camps by a short but fitting nickname, Big Pasang. This moniker stuck not just because of his height or the width of his shoulders. It was a marker of his status. There was another Sherpa, Pasang Lama, who was quickly dubbed Little Pasang. It wasn't an insult, it was just a practical distinction. Big meant he was the heavy artillery. If a trail needed to be broken through deep snow, or if a load needed to be hauled when everyone else was collapsing from exhaustion, he was the one they called. He became the guy clients looked to when they got scared. In 2007, he successfully summited Everest via the classic Southeast Ridge. For many, that's a career pinnacle, after which you can retire and write your memoirs. For Pasang, it was just another check mark on the calendar. He did his job quietly, technically, and reliably. But he passed his real test in the spring of 2008. Pasang went to Makalu. It's the fifth highest peak in the world, a massive black pyramid scoured by every wind imaginable. And he did it clean. He climbed to 8,485 meters without using an oxygen mask. That ascent propelled him into the major leagues. Now, he wasn't just a helper. He was an elite high-altitude specialist whose body could function where jet airliners have to pressurize their cabins. But in the mountains, no one survives alone. Even Big Pasang needed support. And this is where a key factor enters the story: family. Pasang doesn't work with strangers. His partner, his shadow, and his safety line is Jumik Bhote. They're cousins. This changes the entire chemistry of the team. When you're hanging from a rope over a chasm, you need to know who's holding the other end. With Jumik, they share the same DNA, the same village, and a language they can understand without words. They're joined by another relative, Tsering. The three of them form their own micro-clan within the expedition. They share a tent, eat from the same pot, and belay each other on the most dangerous sections. For an expedition leader, it's the perfect setup, a tight-knit group that works like a single machine. No one could have predicted that this close family bond, this absolute loyalty to one another, would soon become their greatest vulnerability. Because if a stranger gets into trouble, a professional can fall back citing safety protocols. But if your brother is trapped, the rulebook ceases to exist. For now, the three of them, Pasang, Jumik, and Tsering, feel invincible. They're young, perfectly acclimatized after Makalu, and ready for the main event of the season. Their target is K2, the Savage Mountain. But when our trio arrives at its base, they don't find the silence of an icy wilderness, but a veritable anthill. Imagine trying to park a giant tour bus on the head of a pin. That's pretty much what base camp on K2 looked like in July of 2008. This summit usually doesn't tolerate crowds, but this season, it got way too busy. Pasang Bhote signed a contract with a major South Korean expedition. It had a loud, almost promotional name, Flying Jump. Behind this banner was serious money and the ambitions of a sporting giant, Colon Sport. The mission leader, Kim Jae-soo, brought a massive team to the mountain. His plan was simple and audacious, to organize a mass ascent. He needed to get as many people to the summit as possible, all at once. To pull off a task like that, you need a lot of Sherpa support, and Pasang became one of the key players. His job here was completely devoid of romance. While the Korean climbers sat below, conserving energy and checking their gear, Pasang was making cargo runs nearly into the stratosphere. His task was to supply Camp 4 at 7,800 meters. This is the last stop before the summit, a zone where life is, by definition, impossible. It's important to shift focus again and look at the gear. The expedition's clients plan to go for the summit with oxygen masks, like divers or astronauts. Pasang, on the other hand, was hauling their tents, food, and gas canisters up there, relying on nothing but his own lungs. He was carrying loads to a place where most people can't even tie their own shoelaces. He did this again and again, becoming a human elevator between the camps. Pasang didn't use oxygen because, for him, it was extra weight and an extra expense. But the mountain had its own harsh edits for the business plan. For all of July, the weather seemed to be mocking them. It snowed for weeks on end, and the wind ripped tents to shreds. The expedition was stuck in a holding pattern. In base camp, the tension grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every day of delay cost thousands of dollars. The sponsors demanded results. They needed photos with flags on the summit for their reports, and nobody in their warm Seoul offices wanted to hear about a bad forecast. The atmosphere in the camp became white-hot. Kim Jae-soo was under colossal pressure. He knew that returning home without a summit would be a failure. This nervous energy spread to the entire team. People started arguing over cues on the route, over fixed ropes. Other expeditions, European, American, Pakistani, were clustered around the Korean group. They were all waiting for the same short weather window. Pasang saw this tension from the inside. He understood the simple arithmetic. As soon as the sky cleared, there would be a traffic jam on the narrow route. Instead of a calm, measured push, a race was brewing. The sponsors demanded success at any cost, and that cost was already starting to add up, long before the summit push even began. Pasang continued to silently carry loads to the high camp, preparing the stage for what would later be called one of the most confusing days in mountaineering history. He was doing his job perfectly, never suspecting that he was diligently building the set for his own drama. August 1st arrives. On the expedition's calendar, this day was circled in red. It was the day of the great summit push. According to the plan, dozens of people were supposed to reach the summit, take their photos with the flags, and be back in their tents before dark. But K2 couldn't care less about anyone's schedule. It all starts with chaos. The summit push is delayed. People are fumbling around, wasting precious minutes in the morning cold when the snow is still firm. Pasang Bhote isn't in the first wave this time. He's staying back at Camp 4, at almost 8,000 meters. His job is to wait for the group to return, prepare hot drinks, and keep things in order. As an experienced Sherpa, he knows the one ironclad rule of the high mountains. If you haven't turned back by 2 p.m., you've already lost the game. He grabs his binoculars and looks up, and he doesn't like what he sees, not at all. In the infamous Bottleneck, the narrowest and most dangerous part of the route, a traffic jam is forming. People are lining up to pass under a looming wall of ice. They're moving outrageously slow. The schedule is shot to hell. The sun is beginning to set, and many clients are still crawling their way up. This is a flagrant violation of every safety rule. Instead of descending towards warmth and oxygen, they continue to climb right into a trap. By evening, the situation is critical. Darkness descends on the mountain. In the death zone, where the temperature can drop to -30 in an instant, being caught out at night without a tent, it's practically a death sentence. Pasang stands by his tent at Camp 4 and sees the beams of headlamps dancing in the darkness, high above him. They're too high. They're not going to make it. And then, the mountain strikes its first blow. Around 8:30 p.m., a roar echoes from above. It's impossible to see any details in the dark, but the sound is unmistakable. It's the sound of collapsing ice. A huge piece of the serac breaks off, sweeping away everything in its path. A Norwegian climber, Rolf Bay, is caught in the slide. But for those higher up, the consequences are even more terrifying. The falling ice severs the fixed ropes. This changes everything. In a single second, dozens of people near the summit are cut off from their descent. Their safety line, their only thread to salvation, simply vanishes into the abyss. No one really knows who's alive and who's not. One thing is clear. Up there, in that icy void, panic is setting in. The group is stranded, people are disoriented, and they are running out of oxygen. Pasang realizes his quiet watch is over. A catastrophe has begun. The echo of this disaster instantly travels down the mountain. Camp 4 ceases to be a resting place and transforms into a rescue headquarters. Sitting in his tent, Pasang can hear the growing commotion outside and understands. He can't just sit this one out. The sound of a tent zipper at 8,000 meters sounds like a verdict. Inside, fragile warmth and life. Outside, a black abyss and -30 degrees. Late at night, when the camp should be settling into an uneasy sleep, the radio crackles to life. A voice, cutting through the static, brings bad news. The Korean climber, Go-mi Young, is missing. She's somewhere nearby, on the final traverse, just a few hundred meters from the camp. But at this altitude, nearby is a deceptive concept. In the dark, with no landmarks, 50 meters off course means death from hypothermia. She lost her way, ran out of energy, and simply sat down in the snow, out of despair. At that moment, Pasang Bhote and his relative, Tsering, have no choice. A stern order comes through. Find her and bring her back. Imagine their state. They've spent the whole day on their feet, hauling heavy loads. Their bodies are dehydrated, every muscle screaming for rest. But instead of a sleeping bag, they're once again putting on their heavy high-altitude boots, strapping on their ice-caked crampons, and switching on their headlamps. They're heading back out into the death zone for the second time in 24 hours. The beam of a headlamp snatches only swirling snow and emptiness from the darkness. The wind on the ridge is strong enough to knock them off their feet. Pasang and Tsering move by feel, scanning the slope. This isn't a rescue operation with helicopters and sirens. This is just two men, trudging through the night, risking getting lost themselves. After an hour of grueling search, they find her. Go Mi Young is in critical condition. She can't walk on her own. The hardest part of the night begins. The Sherpas literally have to drag their client. At an altitude where every step leaves you breathless, transporting an adult in full winter gear is a feat that pushes the limits of physics. Pasang expends a colossal amount of energy. He's burning through the very resources he was supposed to save for his own descent. He works like a tow truck, step by step, pulling the lost climber closer to warmth. They stumble into Camp 4 as morning breaks. The sky in the east is beginning to turn gray. The operation was a success. The client is alive, she's safe, she's being warmed up. Pasang Bhote collapses in his tent, utterly spent. He hasn't slept a minute since the previous evening, and he's physically and mentally drained. All he wants now is to take off his stiff boots, drink a mug of hot tea, and close his eyes for at least an hour. He thinks the worst part of the expedition is over. He's done his duty, he's saved a life in the dead of night. He relaxes, thinking he's earned his rest. But he's wrong. While he's warming his hands on his mug, a new scenario is already unfolding high above in the morning twilight. One that will leave him no time for sleep. The real nightmare is just about to knock on his door. The dawn of August 2nd brings no relief. It acts like a bright spotlight on a disaster scene. The sun floods the slopes of K2 with a blinding light. And now, everyone in Camp 4 can see what the darkness had hidden. Pasang steps out of his tent, rubs his eyes, and picks up his binoculars. What he sees through the lenses instantly erases any lingering fatigue. High up the slope, hanging just over the infamous Bottleneck, are 3 dots. They aren't rocks or abandoned backpacks. They're people. They look like dolls tied to the ice wall. The optics are good enough to make out the color of their high-altitude suits. Pasang recognizes them instantly. 2 of them in bright gear are the Korean clients, but the third figure makes his heart skip a beat. It's a familiar silhouette, familiar gear. It's Jumik Bhote, his brother. The situation is like a terrifying puzzle. They're alive. Through the binoculars, he can see them moving, trying to shift their numb legs, but they're trapped in what climbers call a spider's web. Old ropes left from previous years and new ones fixed just yesterday have become tangled into one giant deadly knot. The climbers are caught in this mess of nylon. They're hanging on a steep wall of ice, unable to move up or down. They're conscious, they can see the camp below, but they can't free themselves. At that moment, the atmosphere in Camp 4 changes. Normally, the sight of living comrades in trouble would trigger an immediate mobilization. But today, the mood is completely different. A harsh self-preservation mode kicks in. Most of the climbers who survived yesterday's chaos are thinking of only one thing: getting the hell out. People are frantically packing their bags. They're checking their remaining oxygen, not to go help, but to make sure they have enough to get down to base camp. The logic of the crowd is simple and brutal. The mountain is unstable. Death is up there. We need to save ourselves. It's a mass evacuation. No one wants to risk their life for those who have already been written off. Pasang stands in the middle of this exodus. All around him, people are zipping up their jackets and heading down towards safety, and he keeps looking up. He can see that Jumik Bhote is alive. His brother is in an ice gully, directly under a looming threat, waiting for help. Every minute of delay works against them, as the sun begins to warm the ice, and the giant serac above the climbers could collapse again. Pasang realizes he's the only one who isn't looking away from the summit, and at that very second, as he weighs the chances of survival, the silence of his thoughts is shattered by technology. The radio in Pasang's hand crackles, and the sound cuts through the frosty air more sharply than the wind. The voice on the other end isn't asking, it's demanding. It's Kim Jae-soo, the expedition leader. He's safe in base camp, far below, where there's hot food and thick air. But his words hit their mark, right here in the death zone. Kim can see his ambitious project falling apart through his own binoculars, and he plays his strongest card. According to eyewitnesses, he preys on their deepest sense of obligation, a mix of duty and money. I paid for their safety. This is your responsibility. A phrase like that, or something very close to it, crackles from the speaker. This is a moment of truth, the kind that divides people into two categories. The leader is reminding the Sherpas of their contract, that the clients paid enormous sums to be guided. He's trying to frame a rescue operation as a business transaction. For him, sitting at the foot of the mountain, the equation is simple. The money was paid. The service must be rendered, even if the circumstances have become catastrophic. Pasang faces a choice that can't be made with a calculator. On one hand, the logic of survival. His body is exhausted from the night's rescue. He doesn't have the oxygen reserves for a prolonged struggle. Every mountaineering manual screams the same thing. When the mountain closes, you leave. Descending now guarantees that by evening, he'll be drinking tea in safety. On the other hand, 3 small figures on the wall. And while the Korean clients are his job, Jumik is a part of him. Pasang looks at Tsering. They don't need a long discussion. They understand each other with just a look. The arguments about money and contracts fly right past them. The real reason they don't turn back has nothing to do with finances. Up there, in an icy prison, their brother is slowly fading. In Sherpa culture, leaving a family member to die alone when there's even a single chance to save them. That's a fate worse than death itself. Around them, a mass escape is underway. Camp 4 looks like a sinking ship. Dozens of climbers from different countries, saving their own lives, begin their descent. They pass by Pasang, their eyes downcast, focused only on their boots and the ropes leading down. It's a current, flowing towards life, and at that moment, reality splits in two. 2 men turn against the tide. Pasang and Pasang Bhote take a step up. They are walking towards the very danger everyone else is running from. It's a surreal sight. As a colorful snake of people descends toward the base, 2 lone figures begin to climb back into the sky. They leave everything non-essential behind in their tents. No sleeping bags, minimal food. They take only the technical gear needed to cut away the useless ropes and save the climbers. Pasang immediately sets a pace that seems impossible at this altitude. He's traveling light. His pack is nearly empty, containing just ropes, carabiners, and maybe a bottle of water. Most importantly, there's no oxygen mask on his face. He's deliberately forgoing the tanks. This isn't recklessness, it's a professional's calculation. An oxygen tank means extra kilograms on his back, and weight steals speed. In his situation, speed is the only chance he has to cheat the mountain. He needs to get up, do the job, and get down before the sun melts the ice anchors high above. He's betting it all on his lungs and that same roll-walling endurance we talked about at the beginning. But the ascent isn't empty. The path is clogged with people on their way down. It's a surreal scene. Pasang pushes his way through a stream of climbers whose eyes hold only one desire, to be as far away from here as possible. And then, an encounter that could have changed everything. Staggering toward the Sherpas is a man in a bright orange suit. It's the Dutch climber, Wilco van Rooyen. The story of his rescue will later become a legend, but right now, he looks like a ghost. Wilco has spent 2 nights without shelter in the death zone. He's dehydrated, exhausted, but worst of all, he can barely see. He has snow blindness. The sun has burned his retinas, and now his entire world is a milky white fog. Wilco is descending by feel, clinging to life by instinct. When he hears the sound of footsteps and the heavy breathing of people heading up, his mind tries to issue a warning. He knows the horror that's unfolding up there. He just escaped it. The Dutchman tries to say something, gesturing, waving his hands toward the summit as if trying to put up an invisible stop sign. But communication at 8,000 meters is like a game of broken telephone. Words are lost in the wind. The blinded European can't see the Sherpas' faces, and Pasang has no time for a lengthy debrief. To him, Wilco is just another survivor who got lucky. The Sherpa doesn't see a warning. He sees an obstacle to get around. This is one of the most dramatic pressure points of the entire story. They pass each other on the narrow trail, their shoulders literally brushing. 2 fates diverge in opposite directions. Wilco van Rooyen stumbles downward toward hot tea, doctors, and life. Pasang Bhote, full of strength and determination, takes a step upward into the very zone that nearly killed the Dutchman. Pasang and Tsering Bhote continue to gain altitude, closing the distance to the bottleneck with every minute. Just a few moments after their encounter with the blinded Wilco, Pasang leaves the last of the relatively safe terrain behind. The trail ends, and before him lies the entrance to the place climbers call the Bottleneck. If you've never been in the mountains, picture a giant funnel. The walls narrow, and the only way up is through a tight, icy chute. The slope here reaches 60 degrees. That means you can't stand. You're hanging by the front points of your crampons and your ice axe. Any mistake, any wrong move, sends you on a 2-kilometer flight to the bottom. But it's not the steepness that makes this the most terrifying place on the planet. The main threat hangs directly over your head. Pasang looks up and sees the cause of all this expedition's troubles. Looming over the couloir is a gigantic ice cornice, a serac. It's a multi-ton wall of ice, the size of an apartment building, held in place by nothing more than a prayer. This is where a chunk broke off yesterday, severing the ropes. Now, the fracture line looks fresh, jagged, and completely unstable. This is where the most terrifying timer in mountaineering starts ticking: the sun. It's approaching noon. The sun's rays are beginning to hit the top of the serac. For the ice, this works like a microwave. The temperature changes, the ice expands, and microcracks form within it. Any vibration, even a loud noise, could be the trigger. Pasang understands the physics of this process better than any scientist. He can hear the mountain singing, the ice groaning and cracking under the strain. At this moment, he kicks into high gear. Pasang knows he has to get through this section fast. He pulls away from his partner, Tsering. Tsering is moving a bit slower, staying further down the slope. Pasang, however, works like a machine, driving his tools into the hard ice. He climbs to an altitude of 8,200 meters. He's now in a zone with no cover. There are no rock outcroppings to hide behind, no niche to wait out an impact. It's an open firing range, and Pasang is the only target in the center. He reaches the point where the climbers are stranded. He is now directly beneath the overhanging mass of ice. The distance to it is deceptively small. It feels like you could toss a snowball and hit it. Pasang sees the faces of the people he came for. They are in a state of complete exhaustion, their ropes tangled into a complex knot. But the most important thing is, he made it. He's on his feet. He has a knife and carabiners. He is at the epicenter of the danger, but it's here, under the shadow of the collapsing ice, that he gets to work. What Pasang sees before him is a boatswain's nightmare. It's not just a knot. It's a chaotic tangle of old, faded ropes from previous years, and new, bright lines, all frozen together into a single, solid block of ice. Imagine trying to untangle wet, frozen headphones while wearing thick down mittens. And all the while, you're in a high-risk zone, starved for oxygen. This is the exact task Pasang Bhote is tackling at 8,200 meters. He's hanging by the front points of his crampons, kicked into ice as hard as concrete. With one hand, he holds onto his safety line. With the other, he pulls out his knife. Here, at the epicenter of the drama, there's a strange, terrifying confusion. Amidst the tangled ropes and hanging bodies, it's hard to tell who is who. Pasang begins to work like a surgeon. Every move is precise. He clips and unclips carabiners, cuts away useless loops, and transfers the weight of the climbers to new anchor points. This is incredibly strenuous physical work. At this altitude, even tying your shoelaces leaves you breathless. Yet, Pasang is maneuvering full-grown men in heavy gear, literally prying them off the ice wall. The Korean climbers are in a deep state of shock. Hypoxia has turned them into mannequins. They are lethargic. Their reactions are delayed, their gaze unfocused. They don't understand commands. They have to be pushed and guided by force. But Pasang performs a small, technical miracle. A click of a carabiner, and the tension is gone. For the first time in many hours, the men who were hanging like puppets over the abyss are free. Pasang creates a new descent system. He yells at them to move, his voice cutting through the fog in their minds. And it works. Jumik, his brother, the man he climbed into this hell for, begins to stir. He makes the first hesitant movement with his legs, shifting his weight onto the ice. The Koreans start to crawl down after him. It's a moment of human triumph over circumstance. Pasang has done the impossible. He entered the death zone, untangled a hopeless situation, and gave these men a second chance. Now that the ropes are cut, all they have to do is descend the couloir to the safety of the traverse, where Tsering is waiting for them. It seems the hardest part is over. The mechanics of the rescue have worked. The group begins a slow, clumsy movement away from the danger zone, and at that moment, Pasang reaches for the radio in his chest pocket. He needs to tell the world that the impossible has just happened. The static crackle breaks over the airwaves at around 11 in the morning. At base camp, they've been waiting for this sound as anxiously as one waits for a newborn's first cry. On the other end of the line, far below, is Pemba Gyalje, the rescue coordinator. He holds the radio to his ear, afraid to miss a single word. The signal is delayed, distorted by distance and terrain, but Pasang's voice is recognizable. He sounds incredibly tired. In every word, you can hear the heavy, ragged breath of a man who has just worked at the very limit of human endurance. But the tone in his voice is one of victory. Pasang says the phrase that was supposed to be the final line in this drama. "I've found them. Jumik and the Koreans are free." Pasang confirms the operation is complete. They're not just alive, they're detached from the wall and have started their descent. He reports that he's leading the group down toward the traverse, where Tsering Bhote is already waiting to help transport the weakened men further down to the tents of Camp 4. At base camp, there's a wave of emotional relief. The tension that had been building for the last 12 hours finally breaks. People start to smile, to clap each other on the back. Expedition leader Kim Jae-soo lets out a breath. It seems the terrible price the mountain was demanding for their ambition will not be paid. A story of catastrophe is being rewritten, in real time, into a story of heroic rescue. It's a classic false ending. For everyone listening to the broadcast, the story has reached its happy conclusion. In their minds, the group is already drinking tea in their tents. No one sees the real picture. And the reality is this: Pasang, Jumik, and the two clients are still in the very heart of the bottleneck. They've only traded stasis for movement. They are moving, but they are still agonizingly slow. The sun is at its zenith. Its rays are beating directly onto the ice wall above their heads, continuing its invisible, destructive work. Pasang's radio goes silent. He puts it back in his jacket, confident that the worst is behind him. As the group takes its first uncertain steps downward, the sun continues its silent work. The rays heat the structure of the giant serac looming above them. Inside the monolithic block of ice, weighing thousands of tons, critical stress is building. Water seeps into microcracks, expanding them, and the bond between the ice crystals weakens. The timer, set at dawn, finally hits 0. It's around 11:30, maybe 11:45 in the morning. You hear it before you see it. This isn't the familiar rumble of an avalanche, the kind you get used to in the mountains. It's a sharp, dry crack that smothers everything else. A massive section of the ice wall shears away from the main face. For the people in the couloir, in that split second, there is no escape. In Hollywood movies, the heroes always have a moment to look up, to scream, to dive for cover. But here, it all happens faster than the signal can travel from your eyes to your brain. Pasang Bhote, Jumik, and the two Korean climbers don't even have time to process what's happening. The group is simply swept off the face, like crumbs brushed from a table. And witnessing this terrible end is Tsering. He's just 100 meters below, on a traverse, waiting to help his brother and the others with their descent. He looks up at the sound of the crack and sees the most horrific sight of his life. Instead of the string of climbers making their way down to him, a white cloud of ice and debris is hurtling in his direction. The avalanche tears past, just missing him. Tsering stands frozen in a cloud of snow dust, paralyzed by horror. As the dust begins to settle, he sees nothing. The slope is empty. A moment ago, there were 4 people, bright jackets, movement, life. Now, there's only the fresh, glittering scar of ice in the sun and emptiness. No cries for help, no desperate swing of an ice axe. Pasang, Jumik, who he'd just saved, and the clients, they were all gone. The force of the impact was so immense it threw their bodies clear off the route, sending them into the kilometer-deep abyss on the Pakistani side of the mountain. This is how the rescue story ends. Pasang Bhote had done the impossible. He'd climbed up, found them, and set them free. But the mountain claimed them all in the very instant they thought they had made it. Tsering is left alone on the face of the mountain, staring into the white void where his brother and friends had been just a moment before. He needs a moment to process what he's just seen, but K2 gives no time for grief. He knows that if he stays here even a minute longer, the next block of ice will take him too. He turns around and begins the loneliest descent of his life. The journey down to Camp 4 feels like an eternity. When Tsering finally stumbles into camp, people rush towards him. They're all still buzzing from the joyful radio call Pasang made just half an hour earlier. They're expecting heroes, ready for the story of a miraculous rescue. But instead of a triumphant return, they see a single man with a hollow look in his eyes. Tsering doesn't have to say a word. The look on his face says it all. The news that Big Pasang is gone spreads from tent to tent in an instant. The euphoria evaporates, replaced by a quiet, creeping horror. The climbers realized the mountain had tricked them. It had given them a moment of false hope, only to strike when they least expected it. The bodies of Pasang, Jumik, and the 2 Korean clients are never found. K. 2 knows how to keep its secrets. The immense height and complex terrain make a search impossible. They disappear into the giant ice fields on the Pakistani side, becoming a part of the mountain itself. For Pasang's family, back in the remote Roll-Walling Valley, it means there is no grave, no place to lay flowers. But the story doesn't end here. In a world where success is so often measured in altitude and social media likes, Pasang Bhote's actions stand alone. Usually, mountain disasters are stories of human error, overreaching ambition, or just bad weather. But this story is different. This is a story about a deliberate choice. Pasang could have turned back. He had every reason to: exhaustion, no oxygen, the sheer danger of it all. But he went against the most basic human instinct of self-preservation, for something more. His name doesn't just fade into the archives. It becomes a kind of quiet code word among professionals. 2 years later, in 2010, another climber from that expedition, Pasang Lama, the one they called Little Pasang, summits Annapurna. Standing on the summit of another 8,000-meter peak, he dedicates his climb to the memory of his fallen friends. He calls them his brothers, a reminder to everyone that in this brutal business, the bonds between people are stronger than any rope. The final frame of this story isn't one of mourning, but of solemn respect. Pasang Bhote wasn't a random victim of circumstance or bad planning. He didn't die because he got lost or made a mistake. He died as a professional rescuer in the line of duty. He went up when everyone else was coming down, and right up to that final moment, to that final terrible crack of the ice, he was winning.